Hey, it's Nootsie, and today I am so excited. I have somebody who is very dear to me that we're going to be having an amazing conversation, Brent Bruning. And he is a master hand analyst, and he has studied over 20,000 hands. And I had an opportunity to have him look at my hand, and it was just a life-changing event. And so I wanted him to share his genius and his perfect spot in life. And so, Brent, welcome. I'm so happy that you're here.
Well, thank you, Nootsie, and thank you for your beaming energy that pulls any wisdom out of anybody just because of who you are. And I'm sure if you know, Nootsie, you've had this similar experience of the positivity that just comes into your life when you connect with her. So thank you. It's great to be with you anyway, just to have you on the in my day.
I'm so acquainted with your voice because after, we did the initial hand analysis and then we did the shift, I have listened to our conversation multiple times. So I just almost feels like going home when I'm talking to you. But when I first found you, I found you on a YouTube video, and I didn't know there was a difference between hand analysis and reading the palm. So I would love for you to give everyone a little bit of an education on what the differences are and what you really do.
Gladly. All right. So yeah, this is actually one of my favorite topics to talk about because I am not a palmist, right? So obviously, you can kind of guess from the office, I don't have tarot cards around me, or I'm not wanting to tell your future. So the way that you can kind of get your head around hand analysis is as the way that you understand that people have behavior traits that are genetic. And the way that you can understand that is just look at the animal kingdom, right? So if you just take a bunch of poodles and you put them all together, they're dogs, but you take the poodles together and you go, a little bit different than the Great Danes or the Chihuahuas, especially, right? And, but they're dogs, right? But they have different paws, right? And if I was a paw reader, I would be able to guess this is a paw of a Chihuahua, right? So that's what hands do. And hands are a real vital piece of your neurology. So they're developed in cadence with the way that your brain forms in every tiny little step. It is your brain. It is your brain. Your hands are the conscious part of your brain as well as unconscious arteries of your nervous system. And knowing that map, you see a physical map of who Nootsie is. And you see what she likes. Like, no kidding. You see her preferences. You see her talents. You see her life purpose, which is big words for the scientific community. However, this has been proven empirically that you can look at people's fingerprints and see their life purpose, as well as the thing that seems to haunt them in every chapter of their life until they deal with it, because it's an epigenetic ancestral pattern. So you're reading your biology and you're reading your history. So hands give a lot of wisdom for your life, and it's more powerful than any Myers-Briggs test, because Myers-Briggs is a psychometric test that is taking 4 fixed variables. But what if those variables aren't important for you? So those 4 variables do show up in the hand, right? Because we're reading your brain when we're reading your hand. But some variables may be even more important, right? And all the aspects of who you are, your emotionality, your mind, body, your spirit, your soul, is reflected in the hand. And when you organize people by different hands, no kidding, you're organizing people by different souls, different lives, different talents, different spirits. And doing that allows us to see a pattern. And that pattern, after 20,000 hands, or since the 1960s, based on the studies of Richard Unger, who's personally read 70,000 hands, you see the same pattern over and over. Over and over and over. And that pattern is life themes. And so when you're reading somebody's hand, You're not reading somebody's psychometric test. You're reading their entire life, the life pattern. So you kind of got to get your head around that, right? That most people have this kind of ego identity that they're somehow swimming on earth and they're trying to figure out their role as a protagonist, what they're going to do, what the problems that they're going to solve, how they're going to get security, and so forth. Here, I'm taking a much larger view. I'm saying I'm reading your life, and your life has an energy. Your life has a bioenergy to it. And there are certain areas that it doesn't want to go, and certain areas it does. And that's your nervous system that reflects that. And that map or that blueprint is in your hands.
Well, and being that you've done 20,000 hands, some of the people that you have done, it's really fascinating. Like you've done Tony Robbins, you've done Eminem, you did the theological advisor to the Pope. Can you talk about some of the ones that you have done that you found really fascinating?
Well, I can tell you that the experience of meeting these people, for me, I was starstruck, right? Sitting across, just trying to get into, read Eminem. And so he's a rap artist, if you don't know who he is. And he's quite famous in the industry as the king of rap. And he's a hard guy to get connected to. And I was working over the BBC Children in Need Foundation. And so I had access, right? And so, but just trying to do that, I mean, we were right behind trying to get a star anyway, to sit down. You have to get through the team, right? You have to get through the publicists, and just getting into the show where he is. I couldn't reach him while he's in transit. So I had to do it right at the Reading Festival. We have 50,000 people waiting, and they were waiting on a hand reader. He was late because he was backstage with me getting his hands inked. And the intensity of that moment, when you have 50,000 people and the entire staff surrounded with clipboards going, but hey, they set the agenda, and I'm just starting to read the life. But what astounds me also when I'm reading, I've read people like Ben Stiller, which you probably know. I've read people like the head of CERN, who's the Fabiola Giannati. She's like Women of the Year, right? And what astounds me when I make these readings is just the humanity. It took a while for me to get them off a pedestal in my mind, right? It took a real long time. I've got the fingerprint, I got the handprint of Johnny Depp, right? And what he's recently gone through is exactly what you see in the hand. No surprises at all. Not a single one, right? That was, again, over the BBC, and that was my partner who was getting his handprint. But, if you give me that handprint and I don't know who it is, I can tell you he's going to have a drama of confrontation with his partner. And his avoidance style of running into the bathroom is seen in his fingerprints. And his personality, his poetic, dancing interpretation, and this kind of odd, weird reluctance to expose himself is also shown there, right? And so whatever the case is, no matter how famous you are, how remarkably starstruck your audience might be, in the end, these are human beings. They're just in a pretty exalted listening or promotion in their life to create that audience that you might have for them. So the hands kind of give you a level playing field. No matter what you would like to show me, I can see it. And I can see everything. I can see, because these are talking about core issues of your defense mechanisms, your fight or flight response, as well as what satisfies you. And when you go into the internal network of that, look around, you're going to see a human being with all of its frailties and how they get triggered. And you bet everyone gets triggered.
And what's really fascinating about this, because I took a really hard look at it before I decided to engage in it, but this dates all the way back to the Greeks, correct?
At least that, Aristotle, when he was writing about it, was saying that this is an ancient system, right? So we see palmistry texts go back, Hindus have it in, 5,000 years. So who knows how long it's been going back. But certainly, it was taught and was considered like a standard thing back in Greek society. And then it gets, the church got a hold of it later on, a couple hundred years later, and then it got mixed up into astrology. So they kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater, going, okay, well, let's just stop this whole nonsense altogether and just believe in Jesus. Those things, it goes underground and it goes up and down and around. And it has a lot, rightly so, there's a lot of invalidity to it. So palmistry texts are largely interpretive, right? So, if you tell anybody, you did a line of 10 people and you tell the same story 10 times, right? It's going to get pretty distorted, right? So that's a lot of distortion where you lose the context. But, the first book that was, or first or second book that was ever printed by the Gutenberg press was a palmistry book, right? So this is going back. It's as akin to mankind as any job or money, right? It goes back all the way then, right? So
there is an Institute of Hand Analysis. Is that what you attended to get your mastery?
Yeah. So Richard Unger was just a little history there, because I think it's kind of interesting how he founded this. He was a guy who was totally not esoteric. I mean, you can look him up online and you can see his face. He's just absolutely not an esoteric guy. And he's funny. He's funny, but he's not just somebody who's going to go in, come on, law of attraction or anything like that. And with his skeptical and as well as structured mind, he was in finance, doing sales and finance, and he found that reading the hands for clients as well as his own team, he could see who was going to win and who wasn't, right? At that point, he read everybody in the office and he got fascinated with it. He got the bug, which I think I got the bug, and everyone who goes into palmistry, they get the bug, right? And the bug, they're just like, they can't stop. They're just trying to find everything that they can. And he had the bug. And then when he had the bug, he was getting a big pie on his face, at least 30 to 40% of the time, because that's what happens when you get the bug with palmistry. You'll realize how much is just not real. It's really great, but it's not, or at least the way it's presented is pretty so far open to interpretation, you can't get it. So anyway, so he goes backwards in times, and he goes into the area where he was already having a dabble at fingerprints. And nobody had really fully explored the fingerprints. There was a couple of texts you can look on online back about 100 years ago where they recognized that there is a correlation to the way that somebody behaves based on their fingerprint. But that's pretty much, they had a very 50,000 foot level. So having that view, he was very frustrated because he knew that people with the same hands, with the same lines, should behave the same, should have the same problems, and that wasn't the case. So he was at the Library of Congress and he had his big aha moment while he's reading all the research on fingerprints as it goes to your neurology. And there he saw fingerprints are formed as part of your own neurology. They're actually formed at 7 weeks when consciousness comes into the body. And therefore, when you're looking at your fingerprints, you're looking at where you go conscious and where you go unconscious. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So why would you go unconscious other than to go to sleep? Because it's a protective mechanism. Because you're in defense, you're triggered, you're going into a defensive story. And so he looks at that, and every finger since the time of the Greeks has been mapped to a different channel or different energy. So you have your ego side, which is on the index and thumb, which is where you direct, right? You tell people, you hold things, you manipulate. Mars being where you hold the hammer is what that Jupiter, the index finger. So Zeus is also the other word for it. So this was taken literally as well as figuratively. And once he saw that, he goes, I wonder what the fingerprint on the right index finger, which happens to be the directing finger, has anything to do with that person. So he then organizes his handprint collection, which he had 9,000 at that time. And that's when he had his big aha moment. Everyone who had money issues had the same fingerprint. Everyone that was struggling with exposure had a different fingerprint. Everyone that wanted to be an artist as their life purpose and be famous had a different fingerprint. And at that point, he started to realize, oh my goodness, and he could see even gradations of their want, their desire to be it, based on whether it was a big circle, it was like, I must have it in the right index finger, or it was just a, I'm kind of interested, which is another fingerprint. And so piece by piece, he assembled the entire structure of reality as the consciousness is shown as not just a metaphor, but a biological process in you. And once you understand your biological map of consciousness, that's pretty mind-blowing that he can see it. And it's like walking through the soul. So after that, once he saw that, he started seeing it every time. And he's like, okay, you got a money issue. Let's hear it for the next 2 hours. Right. And so he's just seeing the next client and it's like, okay, so you got a relationship issue and you can't say no. And that's what they say. Right. And so after a while, he started teaching this. And in my case, I came to him in a very, very lucky period because I had a palmistry book. Cairo was a guy in the 1800s who was traveling around the United States, reading people like Mark Twain. And he's got this great, history. And it's this old dusty palmistry book that I picked up that kind of blew my mind that that's an amazing life to live. And I'm reading that and I was on a surfing trip. So, obviously I was a unicorn for the surfers and I'm reading everyone's hands, all these surfers' hands. And I got so much joy. And I came back to Switzerland where I'm from, and I was in software engineer and software robotics. So I'm working in a kind of a different way with palmistry. I'm kind of a curious unicorn in this industry anyway. And I couldn't stop thinking that there had to be a structure here. And it must be a life pattern that you see from twins separated from birth. And, when I had that question, it's like when the student is ready, the teacher will come. And with that question, I looked online, I said, somebody's got to have a system that isn't psychic, right? That can actually teach that. And just in weird circumstances, that week is when he was making one of his last trips to Switzerland to teach a class on how pattern recognition is in the hands. And he's just an unsung hero. Like he's in a class of 14 people. And I'm just looking at this going, everyone needs to know, everyone on the planet needs to know that there is a blueprint here. And he's like, nobody's going to believe it. I've been trying. Nobody, they just think it's palmistry. And so I took it seriously and I went through 7 years of training. It was incredible. I mean, these books are like, they're no kidding, like pretty insane books on, learning the handprints. And that's one level, right? So they just throw this handprint in front of you and you got to guess who it is. What are they doing? What's their life purpose? What is their life lesson? What do they do probably as a solution for their life? How are they in a relationship? How are they sexually? What's their biggest struggle, right? And so when you get to that level, then they're able to release you, not before. And he's very, very persnickety on who he wants to represent this knowledge. So there's only a few of us out there.
Well, maybe you could talk a little bit about the science part of it, because I think that for me, when I was looking at it, I wanted to first be sure I felt okay about it spiritually, but it's so scientifically sound that I was just like, I've got to do this. So maybe you could talk about that for just a minute.
Sure. All right. So going to the science of it, there's two angles for it. One is there's literally over 1,000 studies about different syndromes related to the different shapes of the hand. Probably the one you heard about the most obvious is the 2D, 4D, and it's the most boring conversation, but I'll say it and start with what you know, right? That that your ring finger can be large if you were introduced to a lot of estrogen your index finger could be large if you're introduced to a lot of estrogen in the womb. And if there was a lot of testosterone, the ring finger might have a different ratio compared to the index finger, might be larger like that. Okay, that is really, really basic, like that's a penny. That's dropping a penny in the bucket of what is hand analysis. In fact, it's not even interesting in terms of what we can see in the hand. But there is this idea that when you combine all the studies, there is a central picture. And in that central picture, there is a architecture that you can overall see the big picture of people's life, right? So you take the heart line, right? You take this line that comes right up there, and that shows somebody's passionate side. You take the lifeline that's developed at the time before you can bend your hands. And that lifeline is showing how you bend your body, right? So the way that you can understand it is that there are three brains. There are three brains. You have your reptilian brain, right? You know, the second brain is the midbrain, right? The emotional center. And the last brain is the thinking cap, right? The frontal cortex, right? So this model is being explored actually pretty recently, right? But it's been known since palmistry for several thousand years that this is an actual model of the brain, right? This is your prefrontal cortex. And when we're reading these fingerprints, we're reading about how you process meaning, prefrontal cortex, right? And as we look around in a deeper part, we're reading this area right here where you show aggression. And that area is where testosterone comes out. And that's where the amygdala and also the pineal gland comes out when it comes and touches this area that produces the serotonin and dopamine and regulates your consciousness. Okay. So the best way that this can be understood if you're coming new to this is empirically, right? So without going into all the papers, you can just say empirically. Right. So empirically is you take several thousand hands and you start organizing them and you say, okay, let's get all the people with really big ring fingers and just see what we have. You have people that like to be the center of attention. Or you take the index finger and they all like to be idealists and so forth. So I can share my book and then you can see a little bit of the science because I do have a chapter devoted to that.
Yeah,
so you can kind of get, you don't have to imagine what I'm talking about. You can just see it for yourself, right? So you probably know that different people have different hands, right? But what you probably don't know is that similar people with similar lives have similar hands. That's probably, you don't know that. And so people with big, square, thick hands have a strong urge to learn kinesthetically. They got to put their hands on everything, right? And then over here, you've got these people that with short fingers and they got these crazy lines all over their hands. And that is the neurology. So Snoop Dogg does not bend his hand more than a farmer. He just has more lines because he's neurotic. And those lines get formed when you are in a place of being neurotic, right? You can see this if you have somebody go through 3 months of electric shock therapy. That's their hand print before, and that's their handprint afterwards. And so that's 3 months of electric shock therapy. So the lines, if you really watch, they're formed, the three central ones, this one around in the middle and the top are formed before you can bend your hands. So I really like, you've studied Dr. Joe Dispenza, and his method of explaining how we're kind of in an endlessly reinforced pattern, that the more that you experience anything over and over, it starts to become habitual, right? It becomes even a mood or a personality trait at the end, right? So what you're seeing here is the personality trait that is encoded at the end, as well as everything that's about to be coded too. So if you expand per square millimeter, the amount of neurons of the sensory cortex that is responsible for your reality. Your lips would be the size of a basketball, but your hands would be the size of beach umbrellas. They'd be almost as big as you. That's how much information is being shown in your hand. And it's a nervous system. It's not just a bunch of random Indian wires. It's got channels, and some are yang and some are yin channels. Some are dominant, some are recessive or more passive. And they all show in different areas of the hands. So they're formed in different stages, right? So you don't start off with all three parts of your brain when you're a baby. You start off with the reptilian brain, right? You just have instinct. It's like the first 7 weeks, all you have is that fin, because you're an amphibian practically at that point. You're in water and the house is being built. And then the limbic brain is developed, which has the pineal gland, your third eye, and the alert center. And that kicks off when you have a heartbeat. Now, two things happen when you develop a heartbeat. Two most extraordinary events in your life that are the most important event of your life. Consciousness enters your body, if you're a scientist, or you would say your soul enters your body. And what we see is the first line, when the baby is able to move their hands, they get this lifeline when the first reptilian brain is formed. The second is this emotional heart line. And if it's a big smiley face up there, then the person later in life will be much more expressive and passionate. Pretty important information. If it's not so large, then the person will be very reserved emotionally, right? So you already see a central artery about how they are as a person. But this thing right here, that's where the money is. These volar pads are formed at the time, exactly the time when the soul comes into the body. Exactly, like within the week. As soon as the baby shows consciousness, these things balloon outward. And if it's a big balloon, then the person really loves that area. What is that balloon? It's stem cells. And what are stem cells? The areas you want to grow. And it's being triggered by growth hormone. And this is not just an event. It's happened for the next 4 months. It's like this. So since the time of the Greeks, it's been known that the hand does have a map, that there's different sides, right? And you have the index finger over here, your yang side, and then on the opposite, you have this I'm one with everything. Well, actually what you're seeing is this is the area you direct when you're conscious. And then when you go to sleep, this is the area when you're just going to bed, observing the theta region. And then you have your instincts to earth. And then later these fingers over here, the curious. So this region is a map. And you got the judge right in the middle finger, and just imagine the soul is coming into the body or consciousness, and from an epigenetic or ancestral pattern, that family happens to love power. Then what happens is that they get a ball on the end of the index finger, not like this one. This guy has a ball on the end of the ring finger, but you could have a ball on the end of the index finger. And then that person says, oh my God, for the love of God, I want it. And it turns into a fingerprint if it's a big ball. And where that ball is where the person wants to grow. So you can see this. The science of this is validated in two different ways. One, get a bunch of people that you think might be artists and look at their fingerprints. Voila, you see all the people with a circle on the creative part of the right ring finger. Alternatively, you can just, with that sample size, you can just go in and read people and just do a random double-blind test and ask them, What is your life purpose? What do you say is the biggest core part of your life that you can't imagine doing this? Richard Branson cannot imagine being anything but Richard Branson being a visionary leader because he has a circle on his right index finger. Johnny Depp does not. And so you would not see Richard Branson in a trial with Amber Heard. Never. You would never be bullied. That's not the kind of type. His soul can't even put himself in that situation. And if he does, he'll handle it and nip it in the bud when it happens. So this map that you're seeing here are legitimate historical figures with different circles. And wherever that circle is, it creates a life pattern where they say to us, I want to grow up to be somebody famous, or I want to be somebody inspirational speaking, or I want to be just somebody who's correct. And now she also has the artist, and so these things get combined, right? And on and on and on. I want to be a mentor and a teacher. I want to do something innovative. I don't care about the stage. So what then happens is that once that fingerprint is known, it's your satisfaction system. You know, you were born loving Brussels sprouts or not. And if you don't like it, then that also shows. If you don't like power, instead of having this yummy circle on the end of your fingerprint, you're going to have something down here that says, I'm anxious about it. I don't want anything to do with it. Or I just kinesthetically got to plow right through it. So the way that this has been validated is through double-blind testing, right? So you interview somebody, you ask them what their life purpose is, and then you give it to somebody like we did. I did it for 14 years in this book. And I was getting people like Eminem, and I would put Eminem's hand in front of somebody from Pascal Stoessel, who is part of the Institute of Handanalysis. He's leading the chapter on the Europe side. And I put Eminem's hand in, and from that, he was able to guess he had roughly Eminem, right? And that's what we're doing the whole book, is that through an exploration of each of these people that you see here, all of them were interviewed. An astronaut, Eminem, and this is the actual interview, and this is the hand analysis, and they had to answer the same questions. And you can see they map 1 to 1. There's no manipulation here. It was a recorded interview. I have the videotape to back it up. Everyone, and he didn't know anything. The hand analyst had no idea. I was giving him a whole stack of handprints, and I was mixing it up. Here's a shoemaker. See if you can guess a shoemaker from Eminem. And he did. Now, he didn't guess shoe because shoe is not a biological thing, but being able to manufacture things physically with your hands is a biological trait, as well as rapping, because you can't get things off your head, is a biological trait, as well as the difficulty of being bullied through school, as well as feeling like every one of your songs has to be about a battle. That's a biological trait. And he's going to do that anyway. So that was the privilege of meeting all these people, is I got to listen, you know, asking somebody of their life purpose and their life lesson and their biggest difficulty they've had in their life, and then seeing it revealed in the fingerprints in the hand analysis back in Switzerland was mind-blowing. And I'm coming from a specific angle, right? I didn't do this not just because I wanted to prove the hand analysis was real, hand analysis was real. That's not my angle. I wanted people to know that they have a chance to break through to a new life. I want them to be happier, because happiness is seen, as well as suffering is seen in the fingerprints. And when you feel like you're never enough, and you got to prove, and you just got to prove yourself all the time, and you're wrestling with self-esteem issues all the way up until your 30s, you might cycle through quite a lot of women. and so forth. So people come to me for that problem. So I hope that I've adequately explained in a way that you might understand it. There's a deep amount of science around this. You go into the way that the skin forms, how sweat forms, how adrenaline, eczema, how the different hormones create different lengths of fingers, how that ends up showing up into different syndromes and the fingerprints, and how any difficulties, you might get Down syndrome if you have a deformed heart line and headline, all that contributes to the overall theory of hand analysis.
Well, I just love that part of this, that it's so steeped in science, from back all the way back to the Greeks. But your book is really beautifully done, and it's like a piece of artwork. Honestly, it's like a beautiful piece of music. And so
thank you. It's a big one. So just be careful. When you order it, it's going to be large, right? So it's not something that I've been able to distribute on Amazon because, if you go into a bookstore, it's a standard size. So I want it irregular for a reason. And I was willing to accept that. I would rather have this really portrayed in a way that you can see it. And you can see it all at once. You can see, look to the left and right, figure it out yourself. See it with my eyes. Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Well, I think the genius part of what you do is how you work with people. And I want to talk about that because my wish for anybody who is watching is that they would invest in themselves and spend some time with you. You really are one of the most gracious people I have ever met in my entire life. The amount of time that we spent together, and just the way that your pinpoint laser focus and your ability to listen was such a gift in my life. So let's talk about what you do in the process, because I think I don't know anybody who couldn't benefit from it. So,
well, what would you say? Let's maybe start with some problems. What would you say is some of the common problems you find in your circle of people and your listeners that they've asked you for coaching, and maybe we can go from there.
Primarily is like the people that reach out to me and that I work with are always in transition. They feel like they're wearing one set of clothes when they really desire to be wearing a different set of clothes, and they don't know how to make that change. They know that there's a deeper meaning to life. I'm all about transformation. So people who are attracted to me are also in the process of transforming.
Yeah. And transforming into what? A life that they love and live it powerfully, passionate. What do you think where do they want to go?
I think people don't even really know where they want to go. And I think that's what was so valuable about my time that I spent with you, because I had an idea, but the validation that you provided for me about, this is the pattern, this is what you're drawn to, this is what your hands say. So I think I think a lot of times it's people want to transform because they're not happy being a caterpillar, but they don't know what kind of butterfly they want to be. They don't really know for sure, how they are supposed to take flight.
Yeah. So if we go back to that example of the 4 different hand shapes, right? So you remember the farmer's hand and Snoop Dogg's hand, right? But if you go down that rabbit hole, there are in fact 120 different hand shape combinations grouped into 16 different tribes and so forth, right? And you get infinite, kaleidoscope of other combinations within that, all right? Which is on my computer. That's what I did. Like, let's get everyone with those hands, with a Dalmatian hands with like a heart line like that. Another one with a straight heart line. So the advantage of doing that, the biggest takeaway is a validation that these people have said with that biological combination that they're happy. And it's our experience that when we recommend people who have that similar combination and we identify, it seems like you're really good in working as a counselor, or it seems like you're really good at writing lyrics, Eminem, and what are you doing in IT, right? So, when you see those, how mismatched people are, that's a condition of being society, having to accept society norms. But who you are as a person is a dream to fulfill. And that is combined by taking the hand shape that you saw. Let's take the farmer's hand. But with a farmer's hand with a whirl on the right ring finger, it's obvious you need to be building something that's creative, right? This is the creative zone. Let's take Snoop Dogg's hand, then let's rap about something creative. So the strategy to get to creativity is different by the personality. So that's really helpful to know where you're in your zone, right? Now, a lot of people right now are substance abusers of some sort, to dependent on something else in order to feel good. And it's for a reason. They're out of their element. They're in a problem that isn't meant for them. They shouldn't be in that life. And so they're drugging themselves, alcohol, even with coffee, right? I got to get myself stimulated in order to get through this life because it's meaningless. So the zone that I can take you by looking at the architecture of your blueprint will give you an unlimited supply of energy. Unlimited, that's fighting words. Okay, I'm going to give you 7.5 hours of sleep. The rest of the time you're on. It's your time. Now, how do I get you there? It's not just by, making you eat better. You see these people in the before after. I didn't say go eat better. They shifted something. So how that's done is when you acknowledge somebody piece by piece by piece, this is how you are. You're emotionally very caring. You are really the center of attention. Let's combine that. What would that be? That somebody is the host. Okay, then you have an artist life purpose. Oh, you're really meant for a stage, right? And piece by piece by piece, you're getting to tighter zone. As you go in and combine every vote of your hand, every feature, and it's voting saying, I want this life, specifically, not the one that just right. And it's got to be on stage, and I got to do backdrops for the stage, not be on stage. I got to do backdrops. When you get to that level, because that's what the hand wants, just that, then you can see exactly that the family even has that trait. They have a lot of evidence in their past that they've done it. And then they just go, what? I know, I want to do it. I know. Well, why don't you do it? Try it out. Try it part-time and just see how it feels. You're going to find that that's so fulfilling. You're alive. And in that aliveness, all the serotonin and dopamine and DMT, all that fulfillment is going to come back to you loads, and you're going to get younger, which is a crazy talk. That when you go to get your hands read, you're going to go get younger. How's that possible? Because when you're out of your element, that's very stressful. And when you don't know what you want, that's very stressful. When you're in the wrong relationship, either to the job or your own relationship, that's extremely stressful. And stress is not just a one event. It's the accumulation of stress over days, months, years in the same problem, waking up. So it's a compression on your entire nervous system that causes you to try to hold on through this pain as it shows up in your hand, and you end up getting these sideways lines, and the finger starts to bend, and you end up getting discoloration, and it's not even something that you like to do anyway, and you're just fed up. Yeah, what do you think that's going to do?
You're producing that chemistry. You're a walking chemistry, you're an alchemical factory. And when you're living that kind of life, I can attest, you just have corrosive hormones flowing through your body, and you end up having to self-medicate because you're so miserable. So whether it be alcohol or caffeine or social media or exercise or whatever it is, you have to dumb down because you're in such pain because you hate your life. That is so miserable.
Yeah. And, you're getting a payoff too, right?
Mhm.
Mm.
Well,
So
I want to
yeah.
talk about, because when I first came in contact with you, when I first watched the video and then I went on your website, which is people really need to go because it's beautifully done and you have some great
Thank you.
testimonials on there. But I was trying to figure out, exactly how it worked because I have a need to know before I get involved in something. So let's talk about the nuts and bolts of it because I just hope everybody does it.
You bet. Okay. First, there's a trust factor. Before we even talk about this, you have to believe that this is so. Okay. Because nothing I'm going to do to convince you is going to make an ounce of difference unless you're willing to take the leap of faith by seeing it for yourself. Look on the site. And there, I'll show you a zoomed in version. You're going to see something like, these guys, right? And now this person was exercising the same as this person, right? So was she, right? So was she. But what's different is that they shifted. I brought them into the zone, the sweet spot, in a matter of hours, right? This guy was suicidal.
Mm.
He had two gorgeous kids, but he just couldn't hack his life. Now look at him. He's beautiful. So the transformation that you see here is real. It's not something for you to believe. And it is only 4 hours that get them from here to here. You would think talking for 4 hours is exhausting. But in fact, this transformation that you see here is using language to acknowledge your nervous system, like therapy. But the difference between therapy and what I'm doing is I'm giving you a walkthrough of your nervous system, step by step, and consciously opening it up through language, step by step, until you're open and you're ready for business. Right?
Well,
So how does that work?
I can tell you that there is no amount of therapy that a person could do, because I've done a fair amount of therapy, that compares to the 4 hours that you and I spent together. Well, I'll let you get into it, but I can attest, I've done therapy on and off my entire life. And the 4 hours that you and I spent together shifted me farther than any other thing I've probably done in my life when it comes to that.
Yeah. And maybe in your own words, how would you describe the difference between therapy and getting your hand analyzed?
Therapy is just like concepts about, how do you get from point A to B? But when we sat down and we went over, my hand, and then we did the timeline, that timeline was the most revelatory thing I think I've ever done, because you have this ability to just listen, and then you're typing, and then we go through the whole timeline, and you picked out patterns. For example, because you start with our family of origin, and I didn't realize it, but my mom's hometown, Mannheim, you told me, I'd forgotten that it was the most bombed out city in Europe. And so I have this refugee thing that is a familial pattern. And when you pointed it out to me and we carried that thread along with so many other things, I was like, oh, dear Jesus. I could have never seen that, nor could have a counselor ever seen that, because we didn't have the timeline of pictures of my family. And when you would question me about, the images that I brought up, things came out that I didn't even really know that I knew, and stories that I had forgotten, and you put it down in this beautiful way that there is no way 20 years of counseling could have accomplished what we did in 4 hours.
So what you're talking about is, so just to summarize the process, is that the hand analysis is the first step to give you the language to go and shift your life. Okay. So the analysis shows you what is it that your biggest strength is, what are your talents, what is your power, right? Where's your green zone or blue zone? And what is it that you also avoid? What do you not only avoid, but how do you act when you're in avoidance, right? And that shows up in your nervous system. What are the areas? What's the trigger? And then, and intellectually, what would it mean to break through that? And how would we, as partners working together, break through a pattern where you might have suffered in that area more than you've been expressing your power? And from that zone, you're left with, after 2 hours, your head is full with more information about how and all the emotions and everything are starting to come up. Now, why I would say this is different than therapy is focusing on a specific problem and looking at the network and the agreements that you have around the specific problem. I'm seeing the whole picture, and in that picture is a problem among a whole bunch of others. Now, trauma exists in a network, as well as it's nested with all the things that make you great. So when you can see that, you can't just rip it out because it's all part of who you are. It's all your system. It's getting a payoff there. So we need to be able to understand the entire system and be able to look at where would it look like if you didn't have it, and how much you have been in that suffering. Now, consciousness has a way of transforming things. Just speaking, or as the statement, name it to tame it, right? I'm angry, or I'm guilty, or whatever that is. Your language is naming the emotion that would otherwise be overwhelming. Well, what happens if we name all the emotions in the exact level that it needs? And you can then be able to have consciousness over your entire nervous system. That's crazy, right? But that's what happens. When you enter a 4-hour conversation about every part of who you are, something begins to open up. We get ultimately, and even in the first 2 hours, when I'm meeting with you, I'll say, what is it that's the core of your suffering, right? Your shadow side. For one woman, it may be, I can't say no. Another woman, it's I'm not enough. Another woman is I'm constantly, I don't feel like I belong in anywhere. Another person, I'm constantly wrestling with one job to the next. It's the story of my life, right? So that has a root. And once we understand the root as it shows up biologically in your fingerprints, I then ask you, are you ready to shift this? You're not going to shift it unless you are aware of how much it has cost you. Some people can live with the fact that they're human, and that's part of it. It's painful. But if you go dig deep down, you understand the problem, and you recognize how long you've been feeling that way and how it affects the other areas in your life and how urgent it is for you to fix. How much money have you spent on it already? How much therapy, which seems to be talking about the problem rather than going into the emotions and transforming it. 3 years, I often hear, for some people, that I shift in 4 hours. True story.
Well, so initially what happened is I contacted you, I took the test, and then I sent you my hands, and I was really worried about it because of the illness that I had. My fingerprints a lot of them had disappeared, and I wasn't sure that we would be able to do it.
Yeah,
and then I was really embarrassed of my hands. Like, I was so embarrassed of my hands because I have all of the lines, which you told me, I have a fire and air hand, but I thought it was because I wasn't drinking enough water. And I hated the fact.
Can I show them your hands?
Say, yeah. And I hated the fact that my thumbs were flat. And so after our first 2-hour meeting, I literally had a boohoo because I could cry now about it because it was something that I was embarrassed of, which was really my gifting. Like, you set me free And I didn't do a lot of the talking. You talked a lot during that time, but you read me to a T, like you hit me on the head and you knew my patterns, and even to the point of saying things that I would say as a coping mechanism. So yeah, it was jaw-droppingly inspiring, our first 2 hours.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, so we name each part of the hand in the 2 hours, and we make sure that every part is known, right? What areas that you traditionally avoid? What are all these lines coming out of the thumb? What's this what's the positive variation of this? Like, what can you do with it now that it's, now that it's out of the box, now what are you going to do with it? You're a source of transformation with that much fire in the hand. Look at all that stuff. So therefore, it would be misplaced to try to fix that. Take it into the exalted form. So after that, when we have this, we can see both that it's a positive and a negative. We can see that on the positive, we see a very clever woman by the length of this pinky, and who's got a 1,000 ideas. She's highly positive and idealistic, who's loves to jump right in, and very thoughtful, and has a very caring side, has Solomon rings, is seeing X-ray vision, on and on and on, right? But as a negative, we can see also how you suffer. And we look in the fingerprints and we can see, wow, there's a feeling like, where is my power? Is sometimes in a relationship where I can't talk about the elephant in the living room and be my authentic self and say no. And then we can go on and on and on into how then your everything positive that I said turns into a negative. Now, when that gets combined, yippee skip. Now I see how your worst day is. But what you do in the shift is we take that bad day and we see how long you've been in it from an ancestral pattern. And that's where the breakthrough is. So we work with a post-traumatic stress disorder template. It's called a shadow board. And in the shadow board, we see how long you've been in it, right? And so you put a picture of your grandmother and what her problem was, and what it was on your mom's side, and then ultimately your dad was born, your mom was born, and then the mom and dad met and they had that problem, and you're kind of born. So if you're born in the Corleone Godfather family and you're a good kid, but you're born into a family, you'll get that there's a biological river, a challenging set of circumstances and family norms that have you pushed in a direction, whether you like it or not. And no matter what you would like, it's like trying to take a team of horses across a river. There's another river going out against the stream. And that as a child, you just go down the stream. And so what we see is the same problem that your mom and dad had from an epigenetic point of view that I said in the first 2 hours. Riddle me this. How is that possible that they had the same problem I said, and I didn't know your parents or your grandparents? But what we see is that the fingerprints are epigenetic, which means that this is a multi-generational trauma. And when you can see it, then you'll see the impact of it, you can feel it, and through that, you can then pop it. And then something really wonderful happens when you do. You see how you get triggered every day, at least 2 hours to the day, or you get 4 hours on Monday, or 20 hours on a week, or 80 hours in a month. And then you start to see, oh my gosh, this is taking up my entire life. And with that trigger, we then release it. And when we release it, something really vital opens up to the person. They become beautiful. And it's phenomenal that they then break through. And it doesn't matter if you're an orphan and that's the only life you've known. Look at her. She's beautiful. She sees herself. She sees her soul. This is her with her soul out. How I did it? I didn't talk her up for 4 hours. I said, this is the problem. And it's been going on since the time you were adopted, since the time you were kids and your best friend decided to leave you for bullies. You don't belong. Let's just call a spade a spade. And in that awareness and that compassionate awareness, the person then feels the pain, stands in the center of it and says, okay, I accept it. I don't belong. I've done everything for the last 16 years to fix that, and I can't. And something really beautiful happens to the soul when it finally surrenders to that. They belong. They open up like an orchid, but not until they stand in the center and the seat of their soul, which is an epigenetic pattern that's been going on because nobody was able to do it upstream. And now she's doing it for the first time. It's phenomenal. And of course, she's going to create something different than the woman on the left. She's going to create a whole vision of her life as a star, doing singing classes, on and on and on. Not her. And so that's what we're awakening the being. And in that, they create a vision. So that's why the shift is 2 parts, because after you are awakening, you're going to want to get the show on the road. And so you're going to have a vision board, but I don't care about a stack of cash on a table. That's California nonsense. Law of attraction. I don't buy it. Staring at that is not going to give that to you, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Tried it.
Agreed.
But if I say, at the seat of your soul, stand in the pain that you don't belong and be with it every day, and don't try to hide it, wear it proudly. If that's your pain, it's going to be there because it's part of who you are. What I'm asking you is to love yourself, because this is you. And this is how the world occurs, because it occurs differently when you're avoiding that pain, and it occurs differently when you're in it, loving yourself. And in that place, something profound, they pop. And then out of that, you create a big, amazing vision board of your life. And, you know, something really profound happens for the rest of your life. You go live in a different way. And
I can tell you, I'll give you just one example of a big major breakthrough that I had as a result of, you know,
sure.
Things that I was really afraid to look at the shadow, because I think the shadow kind of gets a bad name a little bit. You know, people kind of roll their eyes. I'm not going in the shadow, you know, but anyway, so after I have worked with you, I've really become such a big fan of the shadow work. And, you know, Dr. David Hawkins, he really lines up with that. But one of the things that you told me that I do is that I won't address the elephant in the room. You know, like I'll say to someone, to quote you, like, how are you doing? You know, and be overly concerned with them. And then when they ask about me, I'm like, I'm fine. You want a salad? You know, I'll do anything.
Deflect, right?
Totally deflect. Like, I don't want to talk about what's going on with me. And so what it did for me, you know, like you just nailed me on the head, because I will even say that, do you want to go get a coffee? You know, rather than talk about anything that has to do with me. And so it really made me mature in this area. So what has happened is you asked me if I could be the bigger version of myself and trigger a conflict and not let my whole life fall apart. And it was really, really freeing. And it was so scary at first. I'd almost feel like I was having a panic attack when I would, you know, with conscious awareness, trigger a conflict and just say, like, I'm not getting my needs met, or this is upsetting me, or, you know, and I really didn't want to do it. But you're so correct in, if we can stand in that, it breaks something open. And even though I still don't like it, I'm free in that area.
You know, anxiety is your internal regulation system that says, don't go there. Mm-hmm. And it comes up right? It's electricity, right? And your brain can write a ring fence around certain emotions or certain experiences, and even cut you off from yourself. Some people have anxiety as soon as they get angry. Some people just get angry and they're like, okay, I'm Gina Lola Brigida, and I've had my temper tantrum, and it's passionate and it's sexy, right? But some people are like, God, you're making me do it. So that's a big issue, right? Because they're disconnected from their self. So they're constantly afraid. And as soon as the situation starts to evolve where they have to be powerful, then the anger is also coming up and they get increasingly nervous, and then they shy away from that. So ultimately, that creates a pattern, a life pattern of avoiding that situation that can turn into life pattern of big problems in their life. And when you can stand, if you in a shadow board and look at the pictures and not freak out, but just be compassionate with the pictures, because that's how the second level of your nervous system is functioning. Remember that map? You've got the language center over here, but then you got the visual center. That's right behind the eyes. And then it gets more sensual, right? So the feelings are the chemistry of the feelings is very visual. And if we create a visual board of all the suffering in your life and say, instead of being triggered, you're having just a very slow conversation. You're not in the middle of the heat of the moment. There's nothing at stake here, right? You're just being with the imagery, and that brings up the emotions subtly and then allows you to release them slowly and surely until by the end of it, you're just empty. And the nervous system's going, thank you. We finally understand each other. All right. I'm glad you see me. And now the person goes, I feel great. Well, why don't you just do this all the time? Because it's too nervous. I'm in that situation. So this practice then opens you up to a whole new field to live a life of your dreams, because you then design the life of your dreams. And then instead of freaking out about it, because you could handle it on a shadow board, when the image comes up, you go, oh, that's it. Thank you for sharing. And you keep going. I'm going to break through this right now. I'm breaking through that old pattern where I'm not enough, or I don't feel that I have enough energy or money. And I'm now becoming somebody who is masterful and with confidence in the situation. And if you're in sales, I mean, that's pretty good stuff. If you're an entrepreneur and you want to hack your system to be in the zone all day long, when that situation comes up, and it will come up, your shadow side comes up, because as your energy starts to wane anyway, and you can have a affirmational statement directed toward that particular part of the nervous system, you break through and you end up having the most productive days you've seen in your life. More is accomplished in one day than weeks, because you're using new skills and new areas of your nervous system to corral everyone emotionally and to deal with that, instead of, I'm just going to write another email. All right, let's get everyone together, because, well, how come you didn't do that before? Because I was so scared. Now I've done it in a shadow board and I can deal with those emotions. And now they get Brent Bruning 2.0, the guy who just seems like he got back from Hawaii and he's able to get everything solved by lunchtime. You've had those days. Everyone has those days when they're in the zone. And that's all I'm doing, is I'm showing you how to stay in that zone so you don't have these big energy flags. And if you're over 40, this is a big deal too, because a lot of people are wrestling. They want to have a career that they love, but they don't have the energy to continue doing everything that they want to do. This is the way. And of course, you can go and do your exercise and food, totally makes sense. But this is huge. This is a huge part, because I've got a lot of people eating pretty healthy stuff, feeling miserable with no energy. And I have a lot of people eating a bunch of unhealthy crap, and they're breakthrough and have way more energy. How is that possible? With even little sleep. And I'm not a big advocate, because sleep is amazing. But when you combine healthy habits with this wisdom of how to operate your nervous system and to stay in the zone, you are going to be it's going to feel like you're limitless. And I did it for myself mainly because I got
I
two
mean,
kids.
and you look great, really. I don't know if you have a before and after picture, but
Oh yeah,
even,
I'll show you.
yeah, and you look amazing.
I developed the shadow board. Interesting that we mentioned it because I had problems shifting myself, right? So I wasn't in great shape. Yeah, I wasn't in great shape. I was using, I had some pretty intense appointments, and I was doing, sometimes 2 shifts a day. I don't do that anymore, but I was doing 2 shifts plus hand analysis, right? So it's like I was working 12-hour days sometimes. And the energy was cumulative. I was really becoming an expense. So I was not great, right? I was having some pretty bad days. That's me. Now, bags and everything, you can see that's temporary, right? That's a temporary situation. Obviously, I didn't get a lot of sleep that day, but it was starting to show like long term. This is a marketing video. I'm giving my best shot, right? And it's so hard to look at that. And so that is inflammation. It's inflammation. And what is inflammation? It is where all of those regulatory hormones are circulating around, like insulin and testosterone and things that should be flushed out, like histamine, that should be short term, and they're stuck in your body, and your body's having to consume a lot of water to deal with it, plus whatever else you put in your body the night before, or 2 nights before, or 3 nights before, is which because inflammation is a curve. So some people are in chronic inflammation. That's them. And so when you go through and break through, then something really beautiful. I started taking pictures, and I did the shadow board finally on myself. I'm guilty of like every other person in the self-help community of breaking through clients, but totally sabotaging himself. And I was one of those guys. So I said, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it exactly the way it's done. And then I started breaking through. And I like that guy, right? And that is, seriously, that is now 4 months after. I should be older. I should be 4 months old. I should be that plus 4 months older, right? So what's that guy? It's not a filter. That is the inflammation released because I'm living my life purpose. And I finally had crucial conversations to address the boulder in the road. In other words, there are problems in your life that reflect this thing that you don't want to deal with. And when you finally clear those problems, i.e., have conversations that you should have had months ago, and in this case, it was with my wife to align to the life of our dreams, then things started rocking. And then your whole body goes, finally, that's my life now. And in that place, I created a vision board, and we, out of this place, you can do a lot of things. So you could just in the mood going, okay, if anything's possible, let's go to Hawaii. And that's what I did. I relocated the whole family to Hawaii. Now there's under COVID situations, married to a Romanian, that is not, and being a hand analyst, it's not like, that is reasonable thing to do. But when you have a vision and you're coaching people to live their vision, you better live by example. And so we did. And all this has come to true. All of that. We just got back from Northern Italy, actually, to complete that. I was at the Zurich Film Festival reading all the celebrities there. It's awesome. And yes, this part, I believe, is dead on. Can you reverse your biological age? You bet you can. You bet you can. And I've seen, that is an example. Now, what happens when you add that plus supplements, plus taking alkaline foods and removing the things like that are acidic to your system, like burgers, fries, alcohol, coffee, those things, and you jog on a regular basis. That's ultimately how I transform people into new beings that are super, super healthy. like giants in the area of their energy, and they feel better at 65, no kidding, than they did when they were in their 40s. More alive, more energy, running faster. How does that? Like, I've coached an Olympian. It's really, I'm very privileged to say that. I love coaching people that are in the triathletes, and they use this knowledge. No kidding. And people that are in the entrepreneurial business. I don't know anything about investing millions in Northern Italy, about starting a vineyard. Nothing. But those guys come to me because they want energy. And I'm putting them in the blue zone, and I'm saying, you're going to have this problem, and it's costing you this much. How much does it cost you? Money, energy, and everything. And when they break through in their business. That happens regularly.
Well, I think, a lot of times when people are endeavoring to make changes, they're not only having to fight their own chemistry, but they're doing it with methods that may not pertain to their pattern. And I think that's what's so valuable with the time that I spent with you, because, I can say affirmations all that I want, but if I am not aware of my scotomas or my blind spots of the things that I am avoiding, and that's what was really valuable about the shadow board, because it's, and you do it in such a kind way. That's why I was a little nervous to interact with you, because I thought, I've been beat up enough by myself. I don't want to be beat up again, but you're so kind when you do it. And, you do it in such a way that you can see the goodness in all of it, and you redeem the hurts by witnessing them. But I think when we try to make changes by just saying positive things, it falls so short, because our form dictates our function. And if we don't know what form we're in, meaning the form of our hands, if we don't know what our patterns are, then we really don't understand how we're functioning. And so to say that I feel like I have had a breakthrough as a result of the shift is really an understatement, because I feel like you witnessed the pain that I went through. I think about it a lot. You said my hands looked like I had gone through 3 months of electric shock therapy. And, that in and of itself was just like, okay, that was like, but, you gave me a platform in which for me to spring up to the next level. Mm-hmm. And so it really just is so valuable. It really is.
How did it impact you in your relationships? How did it impact you in your energy? How did it impact you in your money? How did it impact you in your physical well-being and how you see yourself? And how does it feel to be in your body?
One of the things I do that you helped me realize is I disassociate. I didn't spend a lot of time in my body. I would use my body to get a release so I could relax. And so, for that, I have been much more kind to my body. And so that part of it, has changed my physiology. The structure of my body is softer and more supple and definitely more youthful. And then in my relationships, I have put my big girl panties on, and I have triggered confrontations in a very kind way at work and with my husband and with my friends. And I've been willing to let people go that when I triggered a conflict that they weren't willing to interface with me in a different way. And I don't like to let go of people and things. I want to keep everybody close. And so I feel like I have matured so much in that area. It's been amazing. And then, you hit me on the head, 100% about how I present myself. I haven't wanted to be open with the mystical experiences that I'm having. And so I did this series of why I quit Christianity to follow after Christ. And I got all of these mean comments, and it would have shattered me 2 years ago. I wouldn't have been able to take it. And I was been so proud of myself because I am allowing people to disagree with me, and it's not, shaking what I know. And so I feel like, before I was a caterpillar that was coming out of the chrysalis, but I was part butterfly and part caterpillar feet. And I feel like
like a one wing out. Yeah.
Right. And part caterpillar. And I feel like I am emerging out of my cocoon. And, I am really, truly being the phoenix. And I'm just about ready to launch my jewelry line and some sacred geometry t-shirts. And I didn't realize that I was stuck in analysis and it was causing a paralysis. I just thought, well, it's not the right time. It's not the right time. But, you showing me my tinted arch and that I will procrastinate was so helpful. So I feel like not a ton has changed other than my vibrancy and my vitality and my willingness to be authentically who I am, unabashedly, authentically who I am. And the other true gift that you gave me is you articulated for me my life's purpose in a way that I could have never done it, because it was much larger than I was willing to even view myself as. And then, you put it in, you have such a beautiful way with words. You put it in a melodic wording that I have a notebook, and I keep all of the stuff that I have gained from you with me, and I listen to it daily. And it really has made me realize I'm okay with being in the ashes, and I'm okay with being the phoenix. I'm okay with being both. And so there's so much freedom in that. That's why I wanted you to come on here, because I want people to be exposed to your genius.
That of being the event organizer for a transformative spiritual organization. And she is the center of, she's the phoenix. And I showed you people like Byron Katie who share your exact same hand and have the same type of life calling, right? So I convinced both your mind, body, and soul that was, an area that feels good. And to honor that, really. To honor who you are.
The flat thumb that I hated, I always hated my thumb. I'm like, do I just press really hard when I write? Like, why's my freaking thumb so flat? And what you told me as a result of that I think about every day is that I work from a divine level. And so what it has done for me when I look at my thumb and I realize that is it has stopped me from seeking other people's approval. Like, when you're working from a divine level, do I really need 7 people randomly to agree with me that I should be doing this or that? So I'm like, it's so freeing. Like, hey, I got a flat thumb, hey, I'm celebrating my flat thumb now, instead of being like, ugh, stop holding your pen so tight.
Yeah. So the thumb is the area of willpower. And some people work with divine will, like, what does God want me to do today? And that, when you do that over and over and over, that's a biological process. So it's not like I have some kind of connection with God. I'm just seeing that everybody who does that, that's how the nervous system starts to cultivate that. And you can do it unconsciously too. And the thing that is really, really important is that when we put that which you unconsciously do, and we make it conscious, like, hey, you left the bathroom light on, right? You might stop leaving the bathroom light on, right? You're just conscious of it. In fact, I would even go so far to say is nothing in your life gets manifested unless it's consciously manifested. And some people are unconscious. Now, to understand what that means, because they think that they're conscious from the time they wake up to the time they go to bed. But I want you to consider that there are times when you're super alert and you're really living life where you're going, wow, I'm super creative. I'm on fire. I'm totally getting things done. And it's fulfilling and my heart's in it. And oh my gosh, I even got an email that reflects that which I've created out in the universe. And it's a validation of my new project of jewelry, sacred geometry. And it's just brought my life even further down the tracks, right? There's that. But some people are like, oh gosh, now these Christians, these Baptists, they seem to think that I've gone off the path and, oh, I don't want to even respond to her. And she's my friend and I just don't want to deal with this. And you're thinking about that while you're trying to go to Walker to get a coffee. And then you're thinking of that in the restroom. And you're thinking of that and then you're trying to do your project, but then that comes back, right? That's daydreaming, isn't it? And that daydreaming starts to run your life and it starts to feel like it's wearing you down. Now you've got a little bit of this energy and now this is going on. And some people wake up that way after doing that, especially with some of the habits. I'm just going to have a big drink in the end, or I'm just going to do something to distract myself from that thing. And then some people have a lot of these things, right? Those are daydreams. And those daydreams are your defense mechanism. And when I'm reading your fingerprints, I can see exactly what is going to cause you to do that. And when I can show you that, then I can show you where you're going unconscious. And that means that if I can open that territory up, you're going to have a breakthrough of your energy and you're going to be present, actually dealing with like Eckhart Tolle level of presence in your life. And you don't have to go, come on, happy thoughts, while your Aunt Matilda is writing you another what's up message. And you're going, I don't want to deal with this, right? So you deal with it and you handle it in the present way. And since I figured this out, my life has really taken on new levels of confrontation, because otherwise what you do, as anyone does, is they procrastinate. That problem, they give it to time. Time's going to solve it. I'll be in a better mood tomorrow to deal with that. Well, with that, what you end up doing is having a bunch of stuff like a garage that needs to be cleaned up. And then you're waking up every day with a dirty garage. And that's how your brain is. And you're going, but I'm going to do my jewelry business. I'm going to write my blog. But I got all this stuff and just is so exhausting. So what the shift does is it cleans out the garage to where you're like an orchid going, I have just gotten back, I'm fresh. Now, there's another piece there we haven't talked about, is that right now you are shifted and you're back. I asked you, how's your life changed? So what you have is Nootsie in a life that she loves, that she has chosen the life and the circumstances that she has. And she goes, this is what I love. And I'm going to do my business while I have time, I'm going to do this. There's a third piece that you can look on the website, and it's called the hero's journey. And why it's called the hero's journey is that instead of transforming Nootsie, I'm transforming her life. Now that's a different thing. That means that I'm having you engage in all the different areas so that you can upgrade the quality of your relationship with your partner, as well as the quality of your business plans and your clients and everything else. So that's a 360 tour of everything that's outside you, what you happen to feel good about, but you can actually create something so that even if Nootsie wakes up in her shadow with an alien on her face, because Aunt Matilda and the Christians and whatever, and she's like there, you have an entire circumstance of husband and everyone and children going, Nootsie, like I have with my kids. I don't have a choice. I walk out in the living room with an alien on my face and they're like, Daddy, it's off. I can't do that. Otherwise, it's going to be resisted heavily, to say that lightly. So that's the hero's journey, is that in 28 days, we do a whole renovation. But many people just get a hand analysis. Many people do a hand analysis and then they do the shifts. Many people do the hero's journey and they rock their life. I can tell you, it's every part of this, from my, obviously I have a biased perspective here, but I can tell you that from my vantage, it's silly that nobody is doing the full program, because I see if you do this, you're going to get that amazing result. What's the value of that? It's more than what we're paying for the hero's journey. So at least get a hand analysis if you're listening to this, so you can at least understand the pattern, that I can see it. And that already will start triggering and bubbling up. Some people even have a couple of days where like, oh my gosh, he sees it. Now I got to do something about it.
Well, and
happy sweeping it under the carpet.
And you are truly a master at what you do, and you're so kind. And the way that you are able to listen so intently and then, thread it all together and string it all together, it's so helpful to see the patterns. And, sometimes I'm a little bit like, I don't want to be, put in a pattern. I don't want somebody to say like, back baby into a corner, but you pointing out my patterns has freed me, because then I can transcend above it. And I'd love to interview you again and really talk about the shadow a little bit more, because I think a lot of people are really afraid of that. But I just can't thank you enough. You are so important to me. I'm so acquainted with your voice because I listened to our time together a lot. And so I'm really thankful that you came into my life and you've invested in me. You're very, very gracious.
Thank you very much. It's great to hear that. And I'll make sure to replay that to my family and wife. So it really is it gives me a lot of, that's why I do this, right? I got so much energy. Every hand analysis, every shift, I'm trying to contend with major programs out there, right? Because a lot of people have done Joe Dispenza. I was a big fan of Joseph Dispenza until I wasn't absolutely convinced, having seen many people who have come from that program. I like his methods. I'm not going to kid you. In fact, I wanted to go to the one in Basel, but it got sold out. But that said, there is a piece he is missing in that program, and that's this niche right here. It's the shadow side. And how to transform the shadow side isn't going into meditation into this endless vacuum. I'm saying, no, this is where it's tough. You're going into the opposite direction and thinking that's going to somehow recreate all this. No, it won't. Aunt Matilda still remembers what you didn't do in 1984. And so when you can get to that other direction, I can show you how to do it. Then use those two programs, right? Use this program, use Joe Dispenza, but now you have a complete map. And heart math is also vital. Those are really good little pieces of the niche. But in the end, I haven't seen anything do the shadow work better than what the hand provides. And it's not anything to be afraid of. It's just
in the aftercare that you provide, like I just reached out to you. And, one of the things that you told me, I was like Julie on the Love Boat, and I fluff people up. And so I just sent you a note, like I'm not being Julie on the Love Boat, the fluffer of people. And you reached out to me, and we had you graciously had a conversation with me after that. So, meditation is valuable, but learning your patterns and then the aftercare coupled with the meditation is just invaluable.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to list below where people can get a hold of you, and maybe we can do this again. And you're just one of my favorite people. So thank you so much.
I thank you for giving me the audience and to, share your experience with me. It's a great validation.
Okay. Well, until next time. Bye. Be blessed.
Bye.